Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Stronger. It's a passionate moment for us as we try to help the industry and bring awareness to the industry of something that is critical right now. It's a critical issue for tons of our property managers, and Florida is just a huge part of our industry. Florida is really being assaulted, in my opinion, by the politicians and different entities that are holding back the state from opening, from booking vacation rentals. Meanwhile, hotels are out there totally open and able to have travelers. We think this is a full-blown slap in the face to our industry. And we at Streamline and Stronger, we're trying to just bring awareness to the issue. And I think it's more of a fight than just a Florida fight. I do believe that this is a fight that our whole country should be getting behind because of the vastness of our industry being in Florida. So I think we all need to stand up and try to do our parts, whether it's small or big, to help the cause out there for all of our wonderful vacation rental managers. And we'll talk about that today with our guest here. And we're very happy to have on Denis from the FVRMA, the Florida Vacation Rental Managers Association. And his background is he's the executive director of FVRMA. He's been there for about 6 years. He has a background in municipal and state government with a lot of experience in nonprofit associations throughout the years. And we're happy to hear from him. And we do have ongoing shows here with the VRMA next week, and we'll differentiate the FVRMA versus the VRMA, but we know that everybody's trying to fight this fight. So we're going to have Denis on to speak on behalf of the VRMA and their fight towards this, and then the VRMA and some of the folks over there that are also making a push to help Florida and get a lot of different perspective from a lot of different angles. So Denis, I wanted to start by welcoming you.
Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome. We're definitely happy to have you, and we've got Mike up here in the studio, keeping us functioning. And then you have. Let's talk about Florida. Tell us about Florida before we get into the FVRMA specifically. Let's talk about Florida. Tell us about the market size, the counties, the cities, how many companies, the employment that is provided. Give us an idea, an overview for those folks watching about Florida.
Sure. So our association's been around for going on 26 years now. We're a nonprofit association, mostly volunteer driven up until 6 years ago when I came on board as the first executive director here, full-time with staff, so that we could really ramp up the vacation rental industry in Florida. As you mentioned, we're a big piece of that around the country. We're 26% of the U.S. market and continuing to grow. It's a unique state in the fact that we've got a really diverse base of folks that are dealing with vacation rental issues, short-term and long-term here in Florida. So, you've got a good mix of RBOs, property management companies, around 7,000 statewide, and we have about 275,000 units that are for rent around the state of Florida at any given time. So real good portion of the tourism industry here. And in a lot of communities, we're seeing that vacation rentals in some of the major cities are actually bringing in more bed tax revenue than hotels do. So you're seeing 54, 55, and sometimes even more percent bed tax coming in from vacation rentals over hotels. So something that the hotel industry is not very happy about, that we have a growing market share. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of this pushback around the industry, and particularly in Florida.
And when you talk about employment, obviously if the government's going to shut down vacation rentals, tell us about the amount of folks that are employed through the vacation rental industry and how that's going to be impacted by what they're doing.
Absolutely. And, we've got hundreds of thousands of folks that are directly employed by the vacation rental companies here in Florida. And then you've got the ancillary and the indirect employees, which are working in small subcontractors, landscapers, plumbers, air conditioning, and other things. We had an economic impact study that was completed the beginning of this year, and it showed that we were growing at a rate of 300 jobs per day in the vacation rental industry. It was just constant growth going on until COVID-19. That, of course, has changed, and everyone's world has changed since then. We're seeing a lot of folks that are furloughed, and the subcontractors are screaming for some work and itching for us to get back open again, because it's really driven by a lot of small business owners, the whole industry here in Florida. And that's been really part of the most sickening thing to this whole shutdown. It's so biased that hotels and other lodging can stay open and vacation rentals cannot. There's just no understanding of why the governor has targeted our industry this way.
Well, we can certainly speculate, and I think that it's always been an ongoing battle between hotels and vacation rentals, and I would be confident that that's a big driver. When it comes to the FVRMA, tell us about your structure throughout the state of Florida. Given you're saying 26% of the market or so is in Florida. It looks like you've got I think you said it was 67 counties and 400 major cities. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so Florida is such a big state with 20 million people living here. It's geographically just really hard to manage in and of itself. So what we did 6 years ago when we merged the Central Florida Vacation Rental Association with the statewide association, we then created Central Florida's association as our first chapter. And from there, we started growing out around the state, because what we really wanted to do is to have regional representation into the association statewide. So now we have 7 chapters around the state. And it's unique because every one of those chapters now has a seat on the board of directors. They're represented for their region. We can now concentrate a lot more in our efforts in each one of those, because everyone is so different. When you look at a market like the Orlando market, it is so totally different than any of the beach markets are. Whether it's the Panhandle or East and West Coast, you really have to tailor your efforts around that specific region because it's so unique. We've got a big RBO market. The rental by owner market in Florida is probably, if I had to guess, we don't really know the number for sure, probably 50% is the RBO and small management side. And that's something that we started tailoring our membership to 5 years ago. And we said, let's allow individual owners that are doing it properly and need the education to come into the association and join. Whether you own 1 or 2 homes or 100 homes that you manage, we wanted to get everybody in the queue and start understanding how they can run their business more efficiently. And that's been really kind of one of the driving forces behind what we've done to grow this industry here in Florida. We've got a long way to go. Legislation last year was key to getting the professionalism in the industry going. We didn't get it through in the 11th hour. Once again, the governor kind of crushed our hopes of getting legislation through, just like he's doing now with COVID-19 issues. So, we're really concerned about that, and we think that the hotel industry is probably behind that as well. So it's a tough fight here, but I think what's happened is, your tagline of stronger together is certainly something that we're saying and seeing now here in this COVID-19 environment. We've never seen so much support from both the owners, the managers, and industry representatives. We think this is we're going to come out of this on the other side a lot stronger and with a bigger voice than we've ever had before.
Well, I did want to touch on a couple things there. So first of all, so everybody's clear, the VRMA is a national, organization, even dabbles beyond that. But as far as FVRMA, it's a local specific state association. And we are going to be talking more on the national level, but the VRMA itself is getting more involved in Florida as well. So I do like the fact that everybody is trying to come together, even if they're coming together at different angles. At least we're fighting to help Florida, and I want to continue to see that. But there's definitely some controversy behind the owner operator versus the, let's quote unquote say, the professional property manager. And I know that we want to be embracing in this industry, and We want to make sure that, everybody's part of it. But I think that when it comes to regulation, when it comes to the misunderstandings that are happening from a government perspective, from a general public perspective, people got caught up in the world of let's book an Airbnb, right? And Airbnb is you're booking a property from Airbnb, and that property could be an owner operator, it could be a professional manager with hundreds of units. And we've obviously got that battle we've got to fight. As far as personally, in my opinion, I think our industry needs to do a better job of differentiating between professional property managers, companies that have licenses, that are following the process, that have been, they have large staffs doing things. Even small companies can get to that level, but I think that the owner operator is harder to keep held accountable to represent our industry the way that we need to compete with hotels. So what are your thoughts on that? Because to me, I think you go on Airbnb, I think you should have a filter that says go down the path of professional property managers. You go on Vrbo, go down a path of professional property managers. I think it would help on the regulation side for us to communicate and say we're just as sophisticated, we're just as trustworthy, and we're just as legitimate as the hotel industry.
Yeah, and that was part of the legislation we were pushing last year that we had, almost to the goal line. And it was going to require that people had to post their license numbers. They had to post their tax ID numbers. They had to follow certain standards, or they would face the ramifications of having their listing taken down from any of the platforms. So that's a big part of what we're really starting to move towards, is some type of standardization in the industry where you have to follow certain guidelines. And right now, there's not a whole lot of guidelines in place to differentiate between what you might call a professional manager versus a owner operator or anything of that nature, because there's no credentials. And, we have some industry credentials that we have as an association that are voluntary to take part in and to gain some knowledge and things, but there's nothing that is mandated on a state or county level to do any of that type of standardization, so that you have a cleaning standard and everybody's following the same types of protocols. So that's something we'll probably get to at some time. Right now, our big concern is you've got Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and all these other platforms that are using vacation rentals and marketing vacation rentals now. And it's funny, we were just talking about this with someone this morning. I was on Craigslist Orlando, and looking down this listing, the people are listing this property for weekly rentals, which is now totally against the law with the emergency orders. And at the very bottom line, it says, we are operated by a professional management company. So on one hand of the article, you've got somebody who's saying that, you can do something opposed to the emergency order, and then in the next breath, it's saying you're a professional manager. Well, as a professional, you should know that and what you can and cannot do. So that's where we really need to have some very standardized procedures and things in place, I think, that are going to say, I'm a professional because I put in X amount of credits and I got this certification to do that. And that's something we'll see going down the line, I think, in the future, that if we're going to continue to evolve as an association in an industry, those are some real good standards to put in place.
I personally believe that the professional property managers are the heart and soul of our industry, because they are the most equipped to deliver a really special vacation rental experience. So I really think that we need to keep focusing on the fact that our professional managers are the heart and the soul and the center of our industry. And I think that will help on all fronts. I know that you guys at the FVRMA are doing a lot to help with Florida. And I'd like to see synergy between the different associations, whether it's other local associations, whether it's the VRMA, whether it's the FVRMA. I think you've shown in Florida that local state associations are critical. And I don't know why we don't have more in our industry that are working together at the head of the dragon, from each head of the dragon to work together to fight these types of fights together. So if Colorado and California and Hawaii, or they have an association and everyone's working together and they're going to help out the cause in Florida, it's eventually going to help them anyways, because the markets sort of go on a domino effect based on the trends and what's going on with regulation, et cetera. So I do always think it's critical we fight together. Give us an overview, Dennis, on your fight so far since COVID. Since COVID started, how has the government battle been going? Give us just the general high-level overview before we go into detail on that.
Sure. I mean, we're always in a battle legislatively. This past year, we were probably engaged in 67 cities and counties around the state on just regular government affairs and legislative issues. And, I guess that's what differentiates us from the National Association, because we're just hyper-focused on Florida. And being that we've got our different levels of engagement. So we're engaging at the state level. We have a full-time lobby firm that's in Tallahassee, basically camped out at the governor's door right now. When people call in during COVID-19, they're like, well, what are you guys doing? I'm like, let me tell you what we're doing. And we bang down the list of things we're doing. But we're probably one of the only state associations that has a full-time lobby firm that's fighting on behalf of property management up in Tallahassee at the State House. A lot of the state associations aren't as advanced as Florida. They haven't been around as long. We get a lot of calls trying to help them out and guide them on what we're doing, because we're doing it on, like I say, hyper-focused on all levels, state government down to the county level, down to the city level, and even going as far as if a city's thinking about putting regulations in place, we'll actually draft up a model ordinance and say, hey, this is what everybody else is doing and this is what works, so that they understand that we can help them. We're a partner in this. We're not there to just beat up on, every decision they make. We're also there to guide them, because we know the industry. You go into some of these elected officials and you're talking with them and they're like, oh, you're the timeshare guys. And we're like, heck no, we're not timeshare. They'll go, well, you're Airbnb. And we go, no, Airbnb is a marketing platform. And we explain to them the ins and outs of it. And most of them, you'd be shocked at some of the questions that come out of them and how little they know about vacation rentals. Yet they're going to try to pass a regulation to regulate the industry. And that's the scary part.
I think that's such a critical point. If there's one takeaway from this episode, to me, it's that is a massive problem in our space. I mean, you're talking people that are actually involved making policies that are making decisions that don't understand our industry. So if through this COVID process, we can restructure our communication or re-engage on how we want to communicate about our industry, that's got to change. I mean, policymakers, folks that are at that type of level that are influencing policymakers, they've got to understand what our industry is. And we have thousands and thousands of professional property managers that can deliver high quality standards, whether those standards are recommended through the VRMA, whether they're recommended through the FVRMA, whether you guys, all the associations across the country work together to build something that is a good framework. However it happens, we have the management associations that represent us really well. And there's all the owners. You start talking about property rights. I know currently there's some lawsuits out there. There's pending, next step situations when it comes to injunctions and things like this. Why don't you give us an idea of where are we at from a legal perspective currently at this given moment in Florida, through all the different angles that you've heard between the FVRMA and elsewhere?
Sure. So, as we know, early March started to be the decline in the booking side. March 28th is when the actual first governor's order went into place, and it basically suspended everything in the industry here in Florida for vacation rentals, except for essential workers and for 30-plus day stays. But the orders that the governor put out they are so poorly written, and everybody's looking at them going, what does this mean? I mean, we're getting calls from police departments and sheriff's offices and city officials going, I don't even understand this emergency order. Can you interpret it for us? Because we right away started sending out some communications saying, this is what you can and cannot do under the order. And the way that we extracted all that information and that intelligence was we went right to the Department of Business and Professional Regulation in Tallahassee. We went right to the governor's general counsel. Our lobby team was there extracting information so that we could interpret it, because to this day, the state really hasn't sent out any clarification guidelines on the emergency order. That's how bizarre this all is. And I'm getting calls even as today. You know, we're, 48 days into this shutdown now, and we still haven't got any guidelines or any guidance on what people should do. So it's bits and pieces of dragging it out of the state just so that people can operate. And even a couple of weeks ago, we had state officials that were going out and knocking on doors and telling property managers, hey, you got to shut down, you're illegally operating. And we're like, no, your boss in Tallahassee told us we could do this, and you're the inspector under that boss, and you're saying we can't. So we had to go up the flagpole and down again and get clarification and shut down some of these issues. It was just absolutely extraordinary what you've seen going on during this whole crisis.
I mean, I'm fired up because it's totally unreasonable, and I believe that our industry is being taken advantage of, and I think that we really need to stand up. And I know that a lot of folks are doing that from different angles, but have you considered, is there more power, even if you're coming from multiple different angles with multiple different entities, releasing some sort of, press release or some sort of co-branded FVRMA, VRMA, so-and-so and so-and-so, and trying to just maybe, even if it's from different associations, et cetera, have you thought about the value of pushing on all fronts together?
So we have, I mean, at the end of the day, really what's important here is I'm the paid guy, and I say this all the time to the folks in the industry. When we go to a city or a county and we're standing up about an ordinance or regulations they want to put in place, I can get up there and I can spew off for hours. I can tell them every fact in and out of what the vacation rental industry is. We're $31 billion a year. We've got all these jobs. At the end of the day, they know I'm paid to stand up there and do that. And this was an important part back during, the legislative session in January, when I brought a group of property owners and managers with me, both with one home all the way up to 500 homes. And they stand up there and they tell those elected officials, I vote for you. You are my elected official. This is what I do for a living. This is how I do it. And this is how professional I am. That's what really makes an impact. We can get the impact of 20 organizations writing a letter in versus getting 5 property owners and managers that are constituents to get up and say something is so much more important. Yes, it's good to show a united front in the industry and everybody can write letters and things, but it really comes down to those elected officials only are concerned with their constituents, who's going to vote for them, who's going to support them, and that next election that's coming up in the next election cycle. So bad press is not something they want to have, and that's what we've been kind of working on that as well. And we can touch a little bit upon, what's been happening with our video ads.
So what would you recommend to the property managers out there, to people that want to make a difference, that don't know how? Is there any way that people can contribute? I know that there's this phase 1 going on in Florida, and hopefully soon a phase 2 and all of this. Is there any way for the general public, for other property managers to get involved, to help try to push the envelope so that more restrictions are taken off the board when it comes to booking properties in Florida?
Yeah, right now, we've been putting constant pressure on the governor's office. I think last week was a big turning point for us, because last week we just absolutely blitzed the governor's office and all his staff and all the state agencies that are involved in vacation rentals with calls and emails. We had video ads running that one of our property manager members has been doing on Fox, CNN, and the Weather Channel. And that started paying off because at the end of the week, last week, they were like, we get it. We understand. We understand your pain and what's going on in the industry. So I think we're starting to turn a corner now because we've really shown the voice that we have collectively. Property managers and owners have been just phenomenal coming together under this because they've been hammering away at the governor's office. I had one today tell me that they were blocked from the governor's email because every day they send a good morning email to the governor's office and they were blocked. So could have been some language in it. I don't know, maybe. But that's absolutely what needs to happen. Some people say, yeah, he probably doesn't even read them. But let me tell you, when that inbox is chocked full and our petition is at 34,000 people writing in on a petition, all those things matter. Every single story that's in the newspaper that we've been pushing and getting people to write letters for, all that matters. It's constant pressure and it's bad press that the governor's getting. So he doesn't want to see that coming up either.
Yeah, and I certainly want to see what plays out in this as far as what was successful or what got us over the hump, because that could be a blueprint for future scenarios. And when it comes to Florida, what are you seeing right now? What do you think if from everything you've heard, when are they going to reopen? How are they going to reopen it? Where are we going with the cleaning standards? I know the FVRMA created their cleaning standards on the safe home stuff. The VRMA did. So what do you think is going to happen if you were to predict it from everything you see right now?
So I think the biggest thing that's we should look at as the most successful in a blueprint is the grassroots efforts are the ones that are absolutely key in all of this. Getting down to the basics and just communications, and keep that up constantly and in their face. We're thinking that we may see something announced on Friday of this week. We continue to keep pushing for it. We've actually just come right out and asked for it. We want something in phase 2 this Friday. So we're hammering away on that to the governor's office. Their phase 2 and our phase 2 is two different things. We feel that their phase 2 should have been a month or so ago. And, all the things that they're proposing, just Floridians renting and things like that, should be off the table. That was a month ago. Now we need to move forward and open up the domestic market. We need to just move forward with, basic sanitary procedures and things that are related to COVID-19, such as the CDC cleaning guides. At first they asked a lot of questions about what should we do about cleaning and sanitation. And then they kind of shied away from it and said, yeah, we're not so concerned about the cleaning and sanitation side. So now we've said, well, then you already have sanitation standards for hotels and motels and vacation rentals. The state has those in place. We'll abide by those. And then the CDC guidelines, bring that up another notch. So those are the two things that we're kind of going with now to follow as a rule of thumb, as the very least, and the minimum standards to clean. We don't want to have any distance between stays any longer because, it's something that should have been done last month, not in phase 2. And no international. We know that the international market's not ready to open up yet. It's going to be a while. Leave that off the table for now and just open it up domestically. If he wants to keep some type of quarantine for the hotspot areas in the country, that's fine. At least we can start to operate and get back to some kind of normal operating procedure here.
So right now you think people, the best thing they can do to help with this is write the governor's office?
Write him every day, call his office every day. We've blocked up his voicemails several times where he wouldn't take any more calls. We have an entire list of every person on his staff. We have an entire list of him, the governor, and his secretaries and DBPR and other agencies. Just hammer away at them and let them know, because they're going to be the ones that are going to make the decision at the end of the day and influence his decision. So that's really the main thing. We have heard that, some of the counties in Florida, particularly sheriff's departments and others, are the ones that have been calling the governor and saying, don't open up vacation rentals because people will flood the beaches and people will flood the cities, and vacation rentals are going to bring in big parties and so on. So if you've got a sheriff's department and, you want to talk to the sheriff, reach out and talk to them and tell them about your industry, because those personal stories of how you operate your business, they don't get that part of it. They only see when there's a disturbance and they show up. Tell them about how you screen your guests. Tell them about your agreement that you have with a guest, how you'll evict people in the past and things of that nature, because you wouldn't believe the eye opener that is for some of these local elected officials and for law enforcement when they find that. Some law enforcement don't even realize you can throw somebody right out. They think you have to go by the regular landlord-tenant rules and go to court to get somebody out of the house. So it's an education for everyone.
The education just seems huge. It's shocking as someone that, I'm not in Florida. I'm not front and center like you are. It's shocking that they haven't figured it out by now, and shocking they haven't learned it by now. So we've got to figure out a way as an industry to educate, I guess, just more and more people. And that's hopefully a takeaway from this. When it comes to local associations, do you think other states should create their own? Do you think, the VRMA should start to help lead the charge on pushing local associations outside of Florida to provide the same type of value that you have?
Absolutely. I think that, really VRMA has a mission across the country and, around the world, because they're an international association. I think they should really hyper focus on getting state associations started everywhere. With the movement we've seen in short-term rentals over the past few years, and Airbnb's growth and VRBO's growth, I mean, they should really be focusing on all the markets to get something started in these communities so that they can get off the ground. Because sometimes you'll get a group that there's so many splinter groups that are trying to form and they just don't have the guidance to do it. I know we get calls from them all the time and they're like, how do you get sponsors and how do you do this? And, we have to give them some guidance on what we do here in Florida. But I think VRMA plays a big part in all of that across the country, of focusing on getting those local associations going, because for a big national association, it's hard to, get down to the nitty gritty like we do in a statewide association and say, today I'm working in St. Augustine, but tomorrow I'm working in Miami. And then the next day I'm working over in Clearwater. That takes the boots on the ground and the local folks that understand that local industry to deal with that. And, on a 30,000 foot level, that's where I think national can really be helpful in getting those people started to understand kind of that basic blueprint in their community, because that's the hardest part, is getting things off the ground. Yeah. When I started at Florida VRMA 6 years ago, we had 150, 175 members. Today, we're well over 1,000 members representing, thousands and thousands of properties around the state.
Yeah, and definitely it's great to see the growth there from an association perspective. One thing about our space is the value of our businesses are the fact that they're local, like the community, the local camaraderie. That's the big differentiator between OTAs and boots on ground, local companies, family-run businesses that people care about in the communities. So I do think the local associations are a really strong way for us to come out of this situation as an industry with some more infrastructure, some more connectivity between all of the different states and regions, and definitely looking at the success in Florida so far is probably a really good place to start. Let me ask you, when it comes to, just break up the topic for a second. We talked about employment and this situation. If people are losing their jobs or getting furloughed and they jump off into different career paths, et cetera, you're seeing a potential threat of people employment-wise not coming back to vacation rentals and having a shortage of hiring options. How are you battling that?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking ahead and we figure there's going to be some shortages coming up. People that have left the industry, they might have had to move on to another career or do something different when we've been shut down here. Some are, of course, collecting unemployment. But we even saw this real issue starting earlier this year and last year, where the industry, we're 26 years old as an association, but for decades, vacation rentals have been here in Florida. And we have some aging part of the industry where folks are getting ready to retire. People were struggling to find employees with any talent. And this is going to be probably something that's entirely shocking, but in Florida, we have one of the biggest hospitality schools in Central Florida, the Rosen School of Hospitality Management. It's ranked like number 4 in the country for hospitality at the UCF college. And they don't teach vacation rental management. None of the colleges teach vacation rental management. It's, how does that happen? So we didn't have a pipeline to fill a lot of the jobs. So people are pirating, hey, I'm taking a reservation manager from this guy and giving him, a couple $1,000s more a year. And people were moving around from company to company, but we couldn't get any new talent. So what we've started focusing on, and we've applied for a big grant for, is to start looking at the high school level and getting kids in the high school interested in vacation rental management in their hospitality programs, and creating a whole new program so that they get out of high school, they've got some real essential skills to move into really the training aspect and internships and other things at property management, to create a whole new pool of workers. Even during this COVID-19 era, where you're going to probably see some attrition, you're going to get some new talent coming in with some basic skills to work in these industries.
That's a really good idea. I think it's another area, and it brings me to a point here. We've got a question on the screen here, and it's talking about our story, our vacation, our I guess you would say our industry story. The comment is basically that an individual owner, booking their own property is compromising our story to the could be compromising our story to the governor's office. Do you think that representing professional managed properties and individual owners together is a conflict of interest?
No, definitely not. You've got a good mixture. You've got to remember that when we talk about the industry as a whole, and even professional property managers, the right to own and rent property is one of the most distinguishable rights under the Constitution. It's the right to own your property and manage your property and rent it and do what you see fit. So if you're doing it by yourself, and I can tell you this, we've got one of our board members who owns and manages 2 Florida properties, $15 million, 2 $15 million homes. And are they a professional? Yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you, they do everything to the T, probably even better than some property management companies do, because they've got a super investment there in their properties that they're financially responsible for, and they're doing everything right. They're paying the taxes. They're involved with the local CVBs. They're engaged with the local elected officials. And this is a person with 2 properties, but you're talking millions of dollars of investment. And then the property managers who are doing things right. Let's be honest. We've got some property management companies that don't do things right. We've got a lot of RBOs that don't do things right. But what we really need to do is have standards, and we have to have some type of compliance that everybody has to really follow, some new guidelines in place so that everybody's on the same even keel, whether you're managing 2 properties or 100 properties or 500 properties. I think it doesn't matter the size of the company. We've seen companies in the Orlando market with hundreds of homes that have gone out of business and walked away with $1 million worth of money from guests and owners and managers. So when you talk about professional versus, the other types, it really is that fine line where you've got to figure out, where you want to go with that as far as some guiding principles for it, I think is where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the dilemma, right? It's like a good example is the lady on your board that has 2 properties. It's just that trying to represent our industry as a very professional, comparable industry to the hotel space, I do agree with the person here that says it does confuse our story, even if it's the right thing to do, or if it's if certain smaller companies or owner operators are very good at what they do, you've got so many of them that it's harder to control that or to ensure there's a high quality and a high standard throughout everyone. Where if you look at our professional association, we all go to these trade shows, we all talk, we all have, abiding by, we're trying to abide by more and more standards. And I think it's easier to tell that story if you separate it. So I understand both perspectives, and I think we'll have to figure out the right way to proceed. But I think it's a lot easier story to tell if we can say we're just as professional as the hotels, if not more professional. I mean, to me, it's the way to go, and it supports our initiative to support property managers too, because I believe more and more owners should be with property managers and understand the value of vacation rental managers versus doing it themselves, especially as the industry evolves. So to me, it's obviously a tricky battle, but I know there in Florida you're trying to solve it. So we definitely appreciate that.
Well, the good thing too is, as we've gone through this transition of trying to get more people into the pipeline of being a professional manager, that we've seen some owners who have come on and we said, hey, you're not licensed, you're not paying your taxes, you're not doing this, you can't be a member of the association. And they've said, well, tell me who can manage it and do it right, because I can't follow the rules and the guidelines and do all this. When you've got some cities who, I'll use Fort Lauderdale, for instance, when you have to pay $1,000 per home to license it, and it takes you 6 months to license each property, then that's the professional manager needs to step in and do that. The owners are like, I can't do this. This is way too complicated for me. I have my day job. So we've seen a lot of that transition of, owners going to the professional management companies. And that's just part of what's going to happen, I think, in this industry moving forward. You can find, though, the folks that do come to Tallahassee with us and talk to elected officials about, their story. That's the powerful part. Whether you're a property manager or you're an owner, that's the real powerful story that these guys want to hear. It's so unbelievable when you see the response to some of those stories when they're coming out.
Well, I think an intended consequence of highlighting the professional property manager more really could lead to our industry getting away from so much of the owner booking, owner management, and pushing everything towards professional. It could have its pros that are worth it. And I know there's two sides to that argument, and I understand them both. But you got to realize that a lot of these owners that are actually living in the property, at a bare minimum, that needs to have a clear separation between a pure vacation rental that's being managed professionally by a small company or a large company. And I don't think that story is really that well known in the general public.
Well, and that's that we could be here for probably another hour talking about that whole topic alone, but you're seeing a trend in Florida now where there's some cities that are saying, we don't want entire home rentals. We want to cater to the rent a room, Airbnb hosted stay type thing. Right in the Orlando market, right in the Miami market, you're seeing some of those where they're gearing towards you have to stay as an owner operator on the premises in order to rent your property. So we're dealing with a mixed bag across the state of Florida right here. And this is where, I can't say this enough. You've got to step up and you got to be part of this solution. If you're sitting back and you say, I don't like the way things are going, but you don't travel to Tallahassee with us and talk to the elected officials, or you don't show up at the ordinance hearing, or you don't, contribute to the advocacy fund we have or anything, it's not going to happen. Because like I said to one of my property managers that was complaining to me today, I said, look, when you had the chance to change the regulations earlier this year, you never showed up to the fight. And now you're worried because all the people that are doing it illegally are still doing it illegally and operating, and you're sitting back and you're closed. You got to fight the fight every day of the week. It's nonstop in our industry, particularly here in Florida, for sure.
Well, primary goal right now is to get Florida open. We know that a lot of companies are relying on the summer. They're relying on the bookings that are going to happen over the next few months. And we've heard rumblings that there might be openings. Do you think there's, in the next month, Florida's going to get back to a fully open scenario? Are you hopeful of that?
Well, I'm hopeful we get somewhere by Friday. I'd love to see something open up on Friday, hopefully with the suggestions that we've pushed forward. we've had mixed messages. Even the DBPR secretary back a couple of weeks ago was talking about regional openings and looking at where there's most infected areas, keeping those shut down, opening up other areas in the state. So you could see something on that measure. The real strange thing is it almost seems like the governor is doing a lot of things on his own. He's getting recommendations from us. He's getting recommendations from other industries, and he's just doing his own thing. So we're just not seeing any movement or rationale behind, what we're trying to get going here for ourselves. We're hopeful though that, we can get the domestic market back sooner than later. Love to see the domestic market up by Friday. So that's kind of where we're going with everything now and pushing hard for that.
So we cross our fingers for Friday and hope the at least that happens. And obviously, I mean, when you say domestic, obviously you're talking the whole country, not just Florida. 'Cause I know originally they were trying to play with that idea, which made no sense to me either. But just domestically in the U.S., there's a chance that it could open on Friday, is what you're saying.
Yeah, we're hoping for all of the United States on Friday. Our opinion is, the time for Florida residents only was last month, and this month we need to move forward with opening up domestically. People want to get out. We saw some of the beaches opening up the other day, and the beaches are just like slammed with people at the beaches. People want to get out and move around. Yeah, sure, there'll be a lot of Florida bookings, people going to the beaches and things, but it's not going to do much for our industry unless we can get the U.S. market opened up to us and get people moving in again. We had 127 million tourists that came into Florida last year, so it's a big market, and they've got to open up, consistently. It's one of the interesting kind of fun facts about Florida, though, is the drive market, which is probably going to come back sooner than later. The drive market is unique because in Florida, the visitor centers that you have along the highways and in Orlando and places, 50% of the people that walk into a visitor center don't know where they're going to stay. So the drive market is just undecided until they get here in Florida. Some of the property managers don't like to deal with those last minute bookings, but it's a big piece of the pie.
Interesting. There's so many unique scenarios like that across our country, right? In our industry. So
Yeah.
To wrap this up, I mean, we want to give people some expectations. We want to make sure that we're spreading the word and getting more and more people in the fight. I know a lot of people are jumping in this because it's such an important time for our property managers. It's their livelihoods are on the line. This situation with COVID, we're all sensitive to it, but it just doesn't make sense to open something that's more social and close something that's more aligned with social distancing. So to us as an industry, we need to feel very upset about this. And I think we need to step up and continue to fight to fix this problem so it doesn't happen in too many other states too. And I know that some are dealing with similar issues, but it's just completely unfair. There's no logic. There's no reasoning. We've got to figure out a way which button to press that gets the job done. I know that a lot of different folks are fighting that battle, you being one of those, and we definitely appreciate all your efforts and work to fight for the state of Florida, which is really a massive part of our industry.
Yeah, definitely. And, we've got some adversaries. We know that the hotel industry is going to constantly oppose us. We've got a big market share here in Florida, and they don't want us to continue to grow. They've thrown $1 million in some legislative sessions against us to fight us on all these issues. Basically, they want us to be regulated twice as much as they are, and that's what they really want. They don't want anything. They talk about a level playing field, but there's no level playing field when the hotel industry is trying to impose more and more regulations on us. So that's kind of the fantasy world that they live in and what they're pushing all the time. Local governments, we do have a lot of pushback from local governments because neighbors and others are complaining about things. It's another one of those education things, though. We've got to get into the communities and talk more with them and get them to understand that, the professional market, how it's operating, because they don't have a clue. But there's so much. I mean, I guess the biggest takeaway here for us is you've got to get engaged no matter what level. If you can only write one letter, that one letter may make the difference. If you can only make one call, that call might make the difference. But everybody's got to get involved in this, because, we hear the complaints, after something happens, which it means it's just too late. You've got to do it right away. And when we send those action alerts and things out, jump on board, take a half hour to go to a commission meeting or something with us, and we're there at all of them. So you got to participate in things.
And I think staying proactive in this industry is so important for us as we come out of this, to prep for the next one, to prep for the next crisis, to prep for the next hurricane, prep for the next regulation that hits us. I mean, we've got to stay proactive, and that's why organization and infrastructure and communication throughout our whole vacation rental industry, which we all love, is happening. So, Dennis, I wanted to thank you again for joining and taking the time to help educate people, and thank you for your fight for Florida. And we hope and cross our fingers that on Friday we get some good news and people can start coming to vacation rentals.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brett, for having me on, and good to see you, Mike.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, guys.